Watching Kyle's unboxing videos again?
Yeah, he always finds the coolest... No way! A robot dog? Gotta ask where he got it.
Or use your Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. Just draw a circle around the dog on your screen, and it shows you where to buy it right in the app.
Whoa, I just learned a new trick. And that for once, I beat Kyle to the next big thing.
Circle it, find it with the new Galaxy S24 Ultra and circle the search with Google. Get yours now at Samsung.com. Internet connection required. Results may vary based on visuals.
Hello, Duke fans, and welcome to episode 358 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. It is Tuesday, November 16th, 2021, and I bet you thought you were going to hear from us sooner today, and we apologize for that. We will explain exactly what we're thinking, and we will try to delve into what we think the Duke basketball program is thinking around some pretty unfortunate news that came out this afternoon. We also have a game to talk about. This is part of why we didn't podcast yet, was that we were hoping to get a little bit more clarity from the game about the bad news. So we'll dive into all of that as best we can. I am your host. I am Sam Klein. I am joined by Jason Evans. Donald Juan, unfortunately, is not with us. His travels continue. So it's just Jason and I holding down the fort. Jason, good evening. What? Tell me about your emotional state today.
It's a tough day for a Duke fan because you don't like to hear about our kids getting in trouble. You like to think of the program as squeaky clean. We all know there is a reality, though, to being a college kid. And sometimes college kids do foolish, stupid things. And that's what apparently happened over the weekend with some members of the Duke basketball team, including Coach K's grandson. So we have to deal with it. We have to move on, and we have to Duke. I think Duke is handling this in the right way so far. I mean, we don't have nearly as many facts as Nina King and Coach K do, but what I've heard so far, it sounds like the way they're handling it is appropriate.
So I'll ask it to you again about that after we kind of make sure we know the facts as of this moment. So while we are recording, it is approximately 9:30 p.m. on the East Coast, Tuesday night. The Duke game against Gardner-Webb just finished about 20 or 30 minutes ago. So we were recording after that. The news was broken this morning by Steve Wiseman over at the Raleigh News and Observer. Please support local journalism because it is important and it gets you stories like this faster than you would otherwise. But Steve Wiseman reports that Paolo Banchero was cited for aiding and abetting DWI, while Michael Savarino, the walk-on, Coach K's grandson, was arrested on the scene at approximately 1 o'clock in the morning this past Sunday. So it would be Saturday night in Orange County, which is where Chapel Hill is. Presumably the guys were coming back from Chapel Hill at that hour. It's not uncommon for Duke students, I would say, to be out at Chapel Hill late at night on a Saturday.
And it should be noted, it was Paolo Banchero's birthday. I think it is highly likely the team went to celebrate somewhere.
Yes. So the team was out, and Savarino was driving Paulo's car. And was pulled over for running through a stop sign. He was then subsequently arrested for DWI. He had numerous signs of intoxication, so he was taken in. Paulo was given a citation.
He's admitted that, like the cops said to him, "Have you been drinking?" And he said, "I've had a few shots."
Yeah. So there's sort of no, there's kind of no disputing that at this point. And then, so that news came out about late morning today. This afternoon, Mike Krzyzewski and the Duke men's basketball program put out a statement saying, "We're reviewing a legal matter involving 2 members of the men's basketball team. Any further actions as a result of this situation will ultimately be determined by the director of athletics and university officials." So that would be Nina King and associates. Coach K, I assume, will be involved, but apparently is not the deciding factor here. Now, Fast forward to game time. Michael Savarino was nowhere to be found on the sideline or in the stadium for the game against Gardner-Webb. Paolo Banchero was there. He started. He played a lot. He was integral to Duke's victory, Duke's big victory this evening against Gardner-Webb. We will talk about the game, just the game, after the break, but wanted Jason to kind of get your thoughts on what we know so far. And obviously, this is still a developing story. Duke fans have only known about this for the last 12 or so hours, and we're sure that there will be sort of more information coming out over the next few days about exactly what happened and how the program is handling it.
Yeah, and in the post-game press conference, which is still going on, Coach K said that Paolo Banchero and Michael Savarino's situations were completely different, and so it prompted different circumstances, different consequences, I should say. And I think that's where everyone is on this, which is that Michael Savarino got behind the wheel when he was intoxicated and he drove a car. That is a super dangerous thing to do. It is illegal for a good reason. You're putting yourself in danger. You're putting your passengers in danger. You're putting other people, innocent people on the road, in danger. It's something that as a society, we have grown less and less and less tolerant of over the years. I've heard people saying like, oh, there have been players in the past who did things like this and, consequences. I don't want to hear any of that. Talk about the past. I don't want to hear about, what potentially happened with Bobby Hurley, JJ Redick, Ala Abdel Nabi. They're Duke players who've been in similar kind of situations to this. Each circumstance is different, of course. I don't want to hear about it because we're in 2021 and circumstances dictate perhaps a different attitude about things today than they did back then. And so I am not at all surprised that it would appear that Michael Savarino has been suspended from the team for some period of time. I've heard talk that it's going to be indefinite, which is a nice. Duke likes to do the indefinite suspension kind of thing because it doesn't tie you into anything. If for some reason the player, if the kid seems like they've really learned their lesson, if they've done a lot of stuff to repent and make up for it, then you can make the suspension shorter. If they seem like they're not learning their lesson, you can make the suspension longer. And so I like the indefinite suspension for that very reason. And at the same time, I don't know how anyone could say that Paolo Banchero should be suspended or suffer any kind of meaningful penalty here. His crime appears to have been that he handed his keys to Michael Savarino. That's sort of the way this law works. Aiding and abetting in a DWI is a crime where, in most cases, it is that you knew someone was intoxicated and you still allowed them to drive. And usually it is a case where you have handed your keys, you've given your keys to someone, they then drove the car. I understand why the law exists. I think making people more responsible for the actions of the people around them is probably a good thing. But on the other hand, it is not that serious a crime. And it feels like the kind of thing that Coach K and Duke will probably deal with Paolo in private. I can imagine that he has gotten a sober and stern lecture, and there probably will be things he will have to do that will not be necessarily made public. But I don't for a moment think that this is a guy who should sit out one, multiple, or games, whatever, because of what appears to be a very, very, very minor infraction.
Jason, I'm going to disagree with you, and I'll say that I thought it was awkward, actually, that Paolo was playing this evening. We don't know how much more the program knows than the public knows. But I thought that it was in rather weird taste, even though I understand that Paulo's crime here was less severe than Michael Savarino's, that he was involved and that it was his car, and that I think he should have known better than all of this. Tells me that at the very least he should have been suspended, sort of pending a little bit more news coming out, and that Coach K is actually setting a pretty weird, to me, is setting a pretty weird position here. I agree that Savarino should have been suspended, and that it would not be sort of out of the realm of acceptable for Coach K to decide to remove him from the team entirely after a thing like this, because as you were saying, I think we're probably too tolerant of this sort of behavior as a society. And Coach K is someone who wants to be and is a key leader in a number of communities, be it at Duke, in Durham, in college basketball, and in college athletics as a whole. And I wish that he would have set a little bit more, a little bit tougher of a response to this over the summer. I think that the story this was getting a lot today by a lot of college basketball media was Mark Few, who was arrested over the summer for a DUI and was suspended from the Gonzaga program. He's the head coach, by the way. He was suspended from the program for one game. He wasn't allowed to coach one game for the Zags at the beginning of the season, and was able to keep his job, was able to basically...
Technically, it was 2 games, but one of them was an exhibition.
Okay. Sure. Whatever. The point, whether it was 1 or 2 or 3, he basically didn't get removed from the program for any meaningful portion of the season. Was not... he was not limited in participating in a potential national championship run for Gonzaga, because all of that came in the context of Gonzaga is one of the best teams in the country. They were one of the best teams in the country last year, et cetera, et cetera. And the team basically had no, there was no sort of limitation on Mark Few's participation in the game this year, in the program this year. So that was the backdrop. And I think it's appropriate to look at that and say, okay, what did Mark Few get? And he's a much older, much more mature person who's running the whole program. You can't possibly punish people more than that. Frankly, I think that's ridiculous. I know, like Savarino, whatever punishment Coach K and the athletic director thinks is okay is totally fine by me. If they want to punish him by kicking him off the team, then that seems completely appropriate. I don't think that we should be tolerant of this kind of behavior. And I do think that Paolo should have been suspended. And I felt awkward a little bit watching the game tonight, knowing that all of this had just come out, and that the team put out, look, the program is entitled to its response to this. It's a private institution, blah, blah, blah. They don't have to do the same kind of, it's not the same kind of access that a public school would have to have. But to me, it's a pretty bad look. And Coach K, if you're going to knock him for sort of any character flaws over the last however many years, one of the things that I don't think he does as well as we would like is address some of these disciplinary issues in public and tell, people in the media, the fans, the public, tell us exactly how he's punishing these players, because let's face it, he's a role model here. And I think that, not all the criticism that Carolina fans and Kentucky fans and whoever else levels at him is fair, but I would like for him to be a bit more public about this sort of thing.
So let me respond in a couple of ways. First of all, I kind of agree with you about him being more public and about Duke being a little more public. On the other hand, I understand that these are the private lives of these individuals. And I mean, they are public figures, I guess, because they play for Duke University. But at the same time, I get why in this era of, tons of activity on social media and everything else out there, you want to try and keep things a little bit private when you can. And like I said, I think handling it internally and referring to suspensions as indefinite gives you leeway to adjust things along the way, depending on how the player is doing. And
I would have liked to see the statement that the athletic department put out, or that the basketball team put out, to one, address the names of the players, because everyone who's reading this news knows exactly.
Yeah, it's a little silly.
About.
Yeah,
they didn't they could say, we know about the about
media reports. Yeah,
exactly. We know about media reports and police reports. It's not just media reports. It's police reports. Like Steve Wiseman was reading Orange County police reports. We know what Michael Savarino and Paolo Banchero did. We know what they've admitted to. We've talked to them about this, and we are determining the best course forward. For the time being, Michael Savarino won't be with the team. Like he could have been more explicit about it, and I think we would have. I personally would have reacted a little bit better to that. Instead, they did the slightly more mealy-mouthed, press release type thing where everyone knows what you're talking about. Why don't you just say it? Why don't you just own what's going on?
I don't disagree with you at all, and that's very Coach K. We refer sometimes to the cone of silence around the Duke program, and we never hear about injuries and things like that. And there's strategic reasons for that kind of thing. Here, there's no real strategic reason for it. I don't think kicking Michael Savarino off the team for the whole year would be appropriate. If that's what they decide, I think that they probably have, evidence, information, testimony, whatever you want to call it, that justifies it. I think the kid should be allowed to make up for his wrongdoing and come back and rejoin what appears to be a pretty special team. I want to go back to Paolo. I've heard some folks say, people who are legal experts, which I am most certainly not, that the citation that Paolo received is not entirely different from, a bad traffic violation kind of thing. Not like a speeding ticket, but like maybe an excessive speeding ticket or driving recklessly, something like that. That it is not but it is not a serious crime. It's not a crime that, under any circumstance, other than something truly, truly extreme that we can't even really come up with in our head, would carry any kind of prison sentence. It's not even something that carries any kind of stiff fine. In fact, my understanding is that the vast, vast, vast majority, and this is a crime, by the way, that's not charged very often. It's very, very rarely charged. And the vast majority of these cases end up being a situation where, like, you take some alcohol awareness class and then they dismiss the charges. Like, there aren't even that many people on the books who have this as a conviction. So for you to say that they should suspend this guy for a game or more, I don't know. Like I say, I don't think that's necessarily appropriate. I think a internal punishment. He probably ran some stairs. That's for sure. Ran some steps.
I just don't know how representative that is of what he did wrong here. And I'm not. I would not describe myself as a very strict disciplinarian. I was not really raised in that kind of environment, but I can understand in this instance if
the other thing I would
to do more.
Right. The other thing I would note is that we know what's in the police report and a little tiny bit of other stuff that's been leaked. That's a very superficial amount of knowledge of this. Coach K, Nina King, I'm sure, have spoken to both the players. I would not be surprised if there were other players involved. Paolo was in the back seat. That sort of says to me there are probably other people in the car with them. So my bet is that, and this happened again, late Saturday night, early Sunday morning. So there's been a couple days. My bet is that the athletic department and the basketball program has a really clear picture of everything that happened, everything that led up to it. And that they decided not to even suspend Paolo, not even have Paolo come off the bench or something like that. There's some symbolic kind of things you can do with a player where you don't start him, or maybe he doesn't play the first half, or, there are things like that you can do. To do none of that says to me, they looked at this and they really don't think that Paolo did much of anything wrong. And I don't feel like we have enough information to dispute that.
All I want, I guess, in that case then is a bit more transparency from the program.
And you're never gonna. I know,
and that's a bummer. Yeah. I think that's a bummer and a bit of a failure of leadership here. So
it is who he is. He's been that way for a long time. I mean, this is a guy who has the only way to get to his office is a special elevator, and you need like a special code to even press the floor that he's on. He lives in a bubble.
And I don't know if I can speak for my entire generation, but I'll say that I would like for us to demand more of leaders and wish that, just because this is how Coach K has run the program for a long time doesn't mean that it's right. And I would like to see a bit more here. I would like to see him be a bit more forward with this issue, even if it's not even if he's not suspending the guy all the stuff. So anyway, I'm sure we'll do more on this topic as more details emerge. Perhaps the program will release more details. Perhaps we'll get more reporting from folks who are in Durham and are able to unearth more of what's going on here. We'll leave it there for now. We'll certainly let Donald give his 2 cents when we next have him on the show. We'll take a very quick break. When we come back, we are going to talk about the actual game tonight, which was between Duke and Gardner-Webb. It was if we can put away this whole saga for a second, it was a pretty fun one. So stick around. Normally, when we do one of these shows, we start off immediately with what happened in the game. And of course, we didn't do that tonight because there was bigger news at hand. But after all the news was coming out about Michael Savarino and Paolo Banchero, Duke played a basketball game this evening. They beat the Gardner-Webb Running Bulldogs. The final score was 92-52. It was 47-27 at the half. So a very clean 20-point lead built up in the first half and another 20-point lead in the second half. This one was close, I think, for the first 10 or 12 minutes or so of the game, lined up nicely with, I'd say that the time that it was competitive was approximately the same amount of time that it took for ACC Network to straighten out the streaming feed. I know that I was not the only one that had issues watching this game because I saw social media talking about how the feed would intermittently cut out. I didn't have audio when I first turned it on. There was no score bug, so I had no idea what was going on.
I can tell you everything. Bally Sports South was my way of watching the game. Great signal. It worked beautifully for me.
Did it?
Yeah. Bally Sports
Oh man.
South. Yeah.
You were, well, I think you were one of the lucky ones. So either you were in Cameron or you had Jason's cable package and you were able to watch this game. I was watching it on Hulu Live in the apartment, and it was a nightmare. I had to refresh the thing a whole bunch of times, but by the time the feed was working correctly, Duke was starting to pull away. There were a number of great performances. So Jason, I'll let you start just with the headline from tonight's game.
Mark Williams is back. That's my headline.
I was going to go with Trevor Keels lights it up from three to remove some of the distraction from Duke this evening. So good. We're highlighting, I think, two different players had great nights for Duke. So Jason, I guess I'll let you start with the good, and you can tell me about Mark Williams, who I think it's very early in the season, but definitely had his best game of the young season so far.
Yeah, no question about it. Mark Williams on this game went for 13 points, only 3 rebounds, but 6 block shots. And you talked about, when Duke started to pull away sort of late in that first half and then really salted the game away early in the second half. That was Mark Williams' time. Mark Williams, just to say that he owned the paint doesn't even do justice to the way that he owned the paint. It really felt to me, by the way, like the team was making a conscious effort to get Mark Williams involved early on in the game. They went to him a couple early possessions, and it didn't work out too well the first few times they went to him. And I was like, oh, I even took a little note. I was taking notes, on my computer while I was watching, and I was like, oh, he's still not the dominant player he was at the end of last year, but he's starting to look a little bit better. And then as the half continued, he got better and better. And by the end, he was completely dominant. The rebound and putback that he had at like 1:55 left in the half was absolutely stunning. He's surrounded by 3-4 other players. He goes up above them. He grabs it. They're reaching for the ball. They like reach his elbows. He's up so high, he grabs it, and then he turns around and does a really athletic, almost finger rollish kind of layup to finish the shot. I said in the pregame, when we were discussing Gardner-Webb and who they are as a team, I pointed out that they're one of the worst teams in the country in terms of getting their shot blocked. Boy, did they show that against Mark Williams. They went inside again and again against him, and he continually said, no, I am sending the ball back the other direction. And Duke turned those 6 block shots into fast breaks again and again and again to really stretch out this lead and turn what had been a close game into a laugher.
And not just those 6 blocks, but he altered a lot more shots that were happening in the paint where guys were driving in or trying to get rebounds. Duke really shored up the some of the rebounding woes and the interior defensive woes in this game. And Williams was a big part of that. He also was able to stay on the floor for 21 minutes and only committed 2 fouls. That is probably something we need to watch this year with Mark Williams is the foul trouble. Not a concern tonight for Williams or for anyone else on the team. This game also, I think, really highlighted not just Williams' ability to contribute here, but how long the bench is. And before I get to Trevor Keels, I wanted to highlight that Joey Baker played 21 minutes tonight. AJ Griffin played 16 and 16 really good minutes, not 16. He disappeared for little stretches, but had a few more, I think, highlights than we'd seen from him already this year. And by the way, Bates Jones, 10 minutes tonight, off the bench, hit one of two of his 3-point attempts, was moving around on defense. So that was really encouraging to see.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? When Bates Jones is in the game, they were using him the same way they use Paolo Banchero, which is power forward, come to the high post. We're going to get you the ball, and you're going to be able to turn around and distribute to other players based on playing here in the high post. And I was really intrigued that Bates Jones was able to handle that kind of responsibility. It's essentially sort of like running your offense through that power forward position. They did that with Paolo Banchero, throughout the entire contest. And I'll talk more about him in a little bit, but I agree with you. I thought Bates did a nice job, but Joey Baker and AJ Griffin, and to a lesser extent, Theo John, were all really excellent today off the bench. Joey Baker, especially, he's putting together already on the season. This game and the last game, I think clearly appear to be probably his two best games in a Duke uniform. He's very confident with his shot. He loves that. I mentioned it last time. He loves that little, I'm going to give you a pump fake. You're going to fly by, and then I'm going to take a step to the side and take a 3-pointer. He was only 1 of 4 on threes today, but every one of them was dead on target, just barely rimmed out. And he's going to have, we predicted this, he's going to have games where he hits 3, 4, 5 plus 3-pointers. He did a really nice job taking the ball to the basket. I thought Joey Baker, he had 3 steals also. I thought Joey Baker had one of his better games in a Duke uniform. Really
to the point about Bates Jones, he was playing in that high post area because Gardner-Webb was showing a lot of zone defense.
Yes,
and
yes.
Duke was getting.
And this is how Duke will play Syracuse, by the way.
Yes. So Paolo is well positioned in terms of his skills to break that zone, and I guess Coach K, rightfully it seems, thought that Bates Jones could play a similar role. So that's an important thing to keep in mind as Duke moves through its schedule. Certainly when they play Syracuse, but there will definitely be other teams that throw a zone defense at Duke that they have to deal with. One-on-one, it's a totally different scenario for Duke on offense, and that leads me to Trevor Keels, who I think is a player that you really want playing one-on-one against guys. He was not as successful tonight driving the basketball as he was shooting. You know what? I'll take it. He was dominant tonight from deep, 4 for 6 from beyond the 3-point arc, and looked really smooth hitting those shots sort of in the flow of the offense. So
by the way, he had 7 rebounds and 4 assists too. Trevor Keels really put up a complete effort in this game.
Absolutely. And if you were worried that Keels is just going to be a driver and that teams were going to maybe be able to sag off of him a little more and get in better defensive position to stop the way that he runs downhill at the basket, think again after tonight. I think that the version of Trevor Keels that we've seen early in the season, if he puts all of those elements together, is going to be so unstoppable, not just for Duke, but that will translate really well to the NBA. It's not like he's the smallest guy on the court. He's got size, and if he's got shooting, then this is going to be a really dominant player.
And I want to talk about the other guys in the backcourt because I thought this was a really complete game for Wendell Moore, for Jeremy Roach, and for Trevor Keels. All 3 of them hit more than half of their shots from the field. They looked good taking 3-pointers. They combined to be 6 of 10 from 3. I'll take that number any day of the week. They rebounded well. They had a lot of assists. Those 3 guys, or 3 backcourt guys, combined for 13 assists, led by Jeremy Roach's 6 assists. It was a really solid game by our backcourt guys. And that leads me to, even though we're talking about offense, to me, the most significant thing in this game was the way Duke turned up the defensive pressure. It was, like you said, the first 10 minutes or so of the game, Duke was struggling to score. They were doing okay on defense, but nothing special. And then they really turned up the pressure, and it felt like it absolutely flustered Gardner-Webb. On a couple occasions, Gardner-Webb just passed the ball directly to Duke players for no apparent reason whatsoever. They had shot clock violations where they weren't even aware that the shot clock was about to go off. They just dribbled the ball out of bounds, passed it out of bounds. It felt like Duke was so intense on defense and so in Gardner-Webb's face that those guys sort of panicked and didn't know what to do. And the key to that, of course, is if they are able to break through the defense that they're getting from Keels, Roach, and Moore, right up there in their shorts, then they're getting close to the lane where Mark Williams is getting ready to swat anything that comes in there. And that's the key. That's the key to great pressure defense. That's why, remember, you asked in the stats game, and I had the highest prediction for Duke's defense. I'm feeling really good about my prediction because our guards are pressuring the ball, and we have big men on the back line who are not letting guys get shots in the lane. That is a formula for great defensive efficiency.
And as you pointed out, Jason, Joey Baker contributed in a big way to that as well. He was in the right position to capitalize on errant throws and errant passes from Gardner-Webb. I think everyone was locked in tonight to that, and you can see it in the final score, 92-52. You don't have a final score like that if you aren't putting in a really, really strong defensive effort. This was not a 70-52 affair where they just didn't have as many possessions. This was Duke was able to score 92 while just limiting to Gardner-Webb. Now, Gardner-Webb is not the best team Duke is going to play this season, but limiting them to 52 is a great outcome.
Hey, and my last good thing I want to talk about, something about Joey Baker. Did you notice with 4 minutes left in the game, in a 40-point game, Joey Baker diving on the floor for a ball? Like, there was a loose ball, and Joey Baker, who has been through 4 years of Duke practices, is like, if there's a ball on the floor, you go after it. And I just, that kind of effort in a game, he's a senior. He's out there playing with mostly younger guys. The game is over, and he's still diving hard on the floor to make a save and give Duke one extra possession in a 40-point game. How can you not love that kind of effort?
All right, Jason, to the extent that there is, tell me about the bad from this game. Maybe you want to talk about the first 10 minutes where, as you said, Duke was not able to kind of pull away early the way that we know that their talent should have dictated.
Yeah, they were struggling, and most of the struggles seemed to be on offense. Sam, I want to give you credit. On the last podcast, we were talking about Paolo Banchero and the fact that he on the season had hit 80% of his 2-point shots. And you said, well, that's not sustainable. You are correct, sir. and no sooner do we need to see it than this game, the very next game. Paolo took a lot of mid-range shots, and very, very few of them went in. He hit shots when he got close right up to the basket, but his mid-range game was really struggling in this contest. And as a result, he has, pretty much unquestionably his worst game in a Duke uniform. I mean, only 10 points, 8 rebounds, pretty nice, but just 4 of 9 from the field. And he felt, it felt like he was, just off a little bit. Not surprising, considering he's probably also dealing with the pressure of that whole incident that we spent a good deal of time talking about earlier on this podcast. But and I'm not concerned about Paolo, but he came back to earth, and that's going to happen. And then the one other bad thing I had, at the 6:32 mark of the first half, there's some dude who ripped a ball away from Theo John. It was truly amazing to see. The ball was in Theo John's hands, and some guard for Gardner-Webb grabbed it away from him. Now, at that very moment, it was so improbable that it ripped open a hole in space-time, and 4 aliens from the 13th dimension came out because they wanted to see what was going on as well. For Theo John to get a ball ripped out of his hands, I was shocked by that. I just wanted to bring it up.
His enormous strong hands.
Yes. Yeah, he looked surprised as well. When the guy did it, Theo was like, what? How did that even happen? But
that's all
I had for bad.
No, I want to go back to your comments about Paolo and make it a bit more of like a macro question with this team. We've talked so far and early in the season about how well Duke seems to be playing on defense and how mature the defense is, especially given that a lot of the workload is being shouldered by guys like Trevor Keels and Paolo Banchero, who are brand new to the program, or who are new to college basketball, and Theo John, who is at least new to the program, although I'm not sure we had any doubts about his ability to play defense before the season. On offense, I think that the team is still kind of getting up to speed, and what we've seen in each of these games is a different offensive approach, different guys playing well on offense every night. And as good as the individual talents are, I am not sure that this team is going to be able to get maximum offensive output from all the guys that are going to be scoring in double figures regularly this season. So that's like Wendell Moore, Paolo Banchero, Trevor Keels, Mark Williams, maybe Jeremy Roach. I don't know that all of them are going to have good offensive nights and ever in a game this season, because I just don't know if the skills mesh with each other perfectly. There are going to be nights when it works for Mark Williams. There are going to be nights when it works for Paolo Banchero. I just don't know how that's all going to come together. And by the way, excited to be proven wrong. Would love to have a game where I feel like it's not just that, all the starters score in double figures, which they did tonight, but that they all look comfortable hitting those shots and that they're all sort of getting theirs in the flow of the offense, even though they all hit in double figures with Joey Baker also coming in with double figures. I don't feel like Paolo was completely comfortable with how his offense was progressing tonight. And there'll be nights where Duke does put it all together on offense. That just wasn't quite tonight.
So you're saying in a game where Duke scored 92 points, where Duke had 6 players hit double figures.
I think Duke's offensive potential is higher than this.
Duke hit 57% of their shots. They hit 45% of their threes. You think they can do better?
Yes, I do. I think
I'm not going to disagree. By the way, I'm not going to disagree with you because there's no question Paolo can play better. And I think a couple of these other guys can play better. It's not like this was a perfect game from anyone on the Duke team, but I think the luxury of what you're talking about is, I don't know that we need 4 guys to be on. We can easily get by. We have so many weapons offensively that we can easily get by with 2 or 3 of these guys having good games. And I think it's highly unlikely that you're going to see 4 or 5 of them all have bad games at the same time.
I'm glad that Duke has Wendell Moore sort of at the center of this team to adjust things. And
he was great. He was great in the second half. And just every time they took a shot of him, he was huge smiles. I thought he was going to have another 10-5-5 game, but he came out too early. He didn't have enough assists. And if it had been a closer game and he'd played a little bit more, he would have had another 10-5-5 game. Instead, he was 14, 5 rebounds, and only 3 assists.
I love that we put that in the stats game this year, because I think that's going to be a really fun one to track.
And I have the high number, and I guarantee you, if we redid it now,
I already feel good about your prediction.
If we redid it, we'd all be in the high teens. I think my high number was 11 or something like that. Whatever it was. Yeah, I feel really great about that one.
All right. So we're not going to do a full Lafayette preview. We had too much to cover today as it was. So
I got a little but I got a tiny bit I want to say about them. Yeah.
I was going to say, Jason has a little bit on Lafayette. So Jason, tell us a bit about Lafayette, the team that Duke is facing on Friday at Cameron Indoor.
Sure. So it's a really interesting kind of team. Duke hasn't played a team that plays really fast yet this season. Lafayette, this is a game that you would think Duke is going to come darn close to, if not exceed 100 points. They have played 3 games so far this year. They played Syracuse. They lost 97-63 to Syracuse. They played Cornell. They lost 90-85 to Cornell, and they played Penn. They lost 85-57 to Penn. So the 3 games they played this year, their opponents are averaging better than 90 points per game, which is a big number. As a result, they are one of the worst defensive teams in all of Division I. And the big thing teams are able to do against them is hit 3-pointers. Get this. Get ready for it. Lafayette's opponents are hitting 45% of their threes in the season. Whew. That's a big number. That is a really big number. And the weird, quirky thing about Lafayette is, even though their games are really fast, and even though their opponents are scoring tons of points, Lafayette's average possession is actually kind of slow. Like, they take their time on offense, but then the opposing team runs up the floor and scores really fast with Lafayette's on defense, which is not a good formula for Lafayette. There's just not a lot of things that this team does really well. They hold on to the ball fairly well. They're good at not committing a lot of turnovers. Other than that, they shoot their free throws well. They're a good free throw shooting team. Other than that, this Lafayette club is not even close to being in a league with Duke. By the way, they're in the Patriot League, so they don't technically give out any scholarships. Sort of like the Ivy League, the Patriot and the Ivy League don't give out scholarships to players. And Lafayette's one of the bottom. Ken Pomeroy has them as the number 315 team in the nation. They're one of the bottom 30, 40 teams in all of college basketball. Pomeroy predicts that Duke will win this game 88-59, almost a 30-point margin of victory that he expects. Of every single game remaining on Duke's schedule, this is the one that Pomeroy thinks Duke has the least chance of losing. So this should be a fairly easy weekend for the Blue Devils as they take on Lafayette, who's just appears to be a team not really in our league. And this should be a game that we at least threaten 100 points.
Yeah, and maybe this is the game where we see the best version of the Duke offense merely as a result of the opponent not being so good. So we'll leave it there for now. We won't do player of the week because it's not the end of the week yet. It is just the beginning of the week. We certainly will be back if we get more, real details about what happened over the weekend with the players on excursion to Chapel Hill. We'll certainly be back after the Lafayette game to review that, and things are gearing up. We've got one more game after Lafayette before the huge game over Thanksgiving break against Gonzaga. So Duke fans are certainly looking forward to that. We'll be back to talk about all of that as soon as we need to and as soon as we can. So for Jason Evans, who is here, for Donald Wine, who is not here, I am Sam Klein. This has been episode 358 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. My apologies that we didn't get this out sooner to you, because I know what time I was able to get around to editing this bad boy, but you've got it in your ears. You've got it in your ears eventually, and we'll just have to do better next time. Stay in touch with us, dbrpodcast@gmail.com. Questions, comments, react to the way that we reacted to the news about Paolo Banchero and Michael Savarino, and we will talk to you again very soon. With that, Duke Band, take us home.